I did a video yesterday that was titled Joe Rogan Goes Full Blown Left Wing, and it's because he really did, man. I mean, he was it is the preface of it was talking about Trump's zero tolerance immigration policy, because normally the way that when people cross the border illegally is treated as a misdemeanor, but what has been done now is they're separating children from their parents by making a zero tolerance policy, which is a very inhumane and disgusting thing to do, separating children from their own parents. It's a very disgusting thing to do. One of the most inhumane and unacceptable things that you could possibly do. And so Joe Rogan was going off on the people who are on his team. I don't exactly know what he means when he's talking about on his team. I'm not too keen on what he's talking about there. But he went on to talk about how he's pro universal education. He thinks that we should have free college. He also is for a universal healthcare system in which everyone has access to healthcare. He lamented the people who are not for that. And here's an interesting one that I actually missed. But here, what you're going to be seeing is Joe Rogan is going to advocate for getting money out of politics.
People are allowing all of this money to get into politics. Why are we allowing all these special interest groups and lobbyists to interfere with our laws and influence our politicians and create all this shit that we don't want?
Getting money out of politics is definitely one of the most important issues when it comes to politics because, you know, if someone were to ask me, and I get this question sometimes, it's, what's the most important issue to you? Now, for me, I always say healthcare. I think that getting universal healthcare is the most important thing because I think that healthcare directly leads to people's livelihoods, as it does. And we shouldn't have 40,000 people dying every year because they don't have access to basic health insurance, right? And so I always say that that's the most important thing. But a lot of people were countered to me saying, well, you know, if you get money out of politics first, then it will be far easier to be able to actually get universal healthcare, which is a good point. I think it's a good point. I think that is definitely true because money in politics is this thing that bogs absolutely anything and everything down with money coming from these special interest groups. Because remember, the people in Congress and the people in our government are elected by the people of the United States. They're elected by the people because they're supposed to represent the people. In a representative democracy, which is what we have with the Constitution, the idea is the people of the United States vote in these people to represent them. That's the whole point of being elected. You're supposed to represent the people. But if you're not representing the people, so I'll give you some examples. So there was a internet privacy bill where ISPs could access what you're doing so that they could advertise. So that, you know, advertisers can advertise on what you were previously looking at. And that got passed despite it having like an 8% approval rating. Also, things like universal background checks, which has, I think it was 80 or 90+% of the American people agree with it, but yet we can't actually have that. And same thing with net neutrality. I can't recall the exact numbers. It was an insanely low number. I think it was something like maybe 14% of people who are in opposition to that. So somehow we have a government in which it's supposedly a democracy, but the government is legislating in the, you know, opposite interest of the people who they were elected by. They're supposed to represent the people, not their special interests. So, you know, that is probably the core issue of our political system that we have right now, because honestly, in effect, we're pretty much an oligarchy. Because, you know, if you have our government simply, you know, governing due to, you know, based on whatever their donors are, that's basically an oligarchy is what we are at this point. And I'm actually glad Joe Rogan called this out, and good on him.